Welcome back to Pack Mentality. And today I'm going to be talking about training through stress and how to stay consistent when life isn't. So I'm sure that you've all been there, is where we've had a week where life punches you in the face and training just feels flat out impossible. And you're not broken, you're just human. And today we're going to talk about exactly how to train smart when stress is high. Now, this is something that I personally been dealing with, or I deal with all the time. And so I thought I'd just share some of my thoughts on this, just because, you're everyone listening to this, you're just like me. You have, a job, you have other responsibilities, either like kids or someone else to take care of. You're also strapped for time and you have very little time for yourself. And so it's really hard to de-stress from a stressful day when your day is filled. And then on top of that, you're thinking about all the tasks and everything that you're just piling up on you, and you're just barely keeping your head above water, trying to get everything on your to-do list done. And this can really affect your training. And so I think a lot of times, and I make this mistake all the time, is I compare myself to when I was in my 20s, when I had less responsibilities, didn't have kids, didn't really even have a career yet, but just kind of going through the motions, work some odd jobs here and there, was just a CrossFit coach, and then I could just eat Chipotle and work out. So, uh, and then as you get older, things change. And so when you hit that kind of phase, you need to realize, or I need to realize, if I could go back in time, was that I can't train like I'm 22 anymore. And there's different ways that you can still train really hard and still make progress and maintain everything without burning yourself out to where you have nothing to give anyone else. And I've seen that a lot because, last thing I want is to be so tired from working out to where I can't enjoy my time with my kids or my wife, or enjoy, going out and just having fun with friends. Because, when I train like an athlete, I didn't really have much energy to do anything else other than recover because I was training so hard. And so I need to constantly remind myself of that. And so I hope that this podcast today really helps you. So today we're going to be going over understanding stress and capacity and how we can monitor those. We're also going to talk about how recovery can take a hit because of the stress levels. And we're talking about also adjusting the plan. Now, we always make plans, and then in our heads, we always tend to make things to where we're going to get this, and this done, but then it rarely works out that way. So, and then on top of that, that can stress us out as well. So we have to be realistic about our planning. And then we're going to talk about normalizing different fluctuations. And then we're going to talk about the long-term consistency over short-term perfection. And I think a lot of you who listen to podcasts like this are somewhat perfectionists because you're always looking for information. You're always trying to improve, which is great. But at times that can also be to our detriment because if you're like me, I want things to be perfect all the time, which can stress me out. And so I've really learned to kind of let go and realize that maybe sometimes 70% is better than 0%. May not be my 100, but for that day, that is my 100%. So let's get right into understanding stress and capacity. So the more stressed you are, the less capacity you have for training. Okay, it's kind of a given because stress is a cortisol response. It's a stress hormone, which can lead to decreased power output. It's not good for fitness. In fact, that your body actually goes into a cortisol response when you train. And so the cortisol actually needs to lower in order for your body to recover. Okay. Body, just muscle recovery, your central nervous system, your aerobic system just does not recover as well when you're under other external stressors other than just the fitness part. That's why when you're younger, it's easier to stay lean. You can kind of eat whatever you want because you don't have nearly as much other external stressors other than either your workout or your occupation. And stress isn't just mental, it's psychological. So training adds to the load. And, I had a client who was crushing workouts while relaxed, but, they hit a wall when work got stressful during certain times of the month, or certain times of the year, I should say. And this is where we have to adjust training. This is why it's so important to have some sort of one-on-one coaching. This is why when we do program design for people and we do program design for our gym, is that we really look at the lifestyle, what they do for work, how many kids they have, what their spouse, if their spouse is supportive or unsupportive, what their travel schedule looks like. There's so many different factors that come into training that are, as you get older, that you have to factor in as a coach outside of the gym that really affects the results inside the gym. And so this client was working with me, and they have a very high stress job. Okay. They work in the medical field. And unfortunately, there are just some days, either during the week or it's even bouts throughout the month or the year, of where we have to really back off the intensity and the volume. We try and keep the frequency the same, but since they work a high stress job in the medical field, that, we can't always go super hard all the time. So our main goal here is actually really focus on recovery because they're also on call. So they're not, so some nights they're getting like maybe 2, 3 hours of sleep and it's interrupted. So this is where we have to adjust training and make sure that we're just getting some good movement in, we're getting some stretching in, and there's other things that you can always work on other than, trying to go hard all the time. And also it's important as coaches that we have these conversations with our members and anyone who we're working with, specifically to manage expectations. Because a lot of times it's really easy to compare yourself, and I do this all the time. I make this mistake is that I'll compare myself to where I was when I was 25, 28, before kids, back when I had less responsibilities and realize that, hey, I'm not that person anymore. And that's okay. I have to just make adjustments and evolve just like other parts of my life. Um, and so we've had those conversations with those members and those clients as well. And it really helps them realize that, hey, as long as my frequency is good and I have a good cadence going with my workouts, I don't have to worry so much about being a high performer when it comes to workouts. Now we're talking about how recovery takes a hit. So recovery isn't just about sleep and food. Your nervous system needs bandwidth as well. And this is often overlooked because you can be actually sometimes either you can get great sleep, you can be eating very well, and you could still feel real gassed. In fact, I felt like this past weekend where I wasn't sore. I was eating well, I was sleeping pretty decent. I probably could have slept a little bit better, but my nervous system was really shot, just from kind of the workload and training that I've been doing lately. And so I need to adjust that and make sure I manage my expectations when it comes to my training come the next week. And I have to be able to be okay with making adjustments, even though I'm kind of type A and I want to do well all the time and I want to go hard all the time and I want to PR all the time. That I need to be able to take a step back and realize that it's not going to happen every day. I'm just like you guys, where I always want to do well, but you just have to realize that, all right, I just have to realize that there are times where it's just not going to be that way. And, pushing harder during high levels of stress actually leads to burnout or worse, injury. And so you get to the point where, and I've done this before, where you just burn yourself out to the point where you don't even want to work out anymore. So that's always a good kind of litmus test is like, do I want to work out today? Am I excited to work out? And, a lot of times we're going to say no, just because of our stressors and our stress levels. This is a lot of reasons why people fall off the bandwagon when it comes to fitness is because it's a natural response because your cortisol is high, you're stressed. Last thing you want to do is add more stress to your plate, and rightfully so, because it's going to make it harder to recover. So you have to make sure that we're doing workouts that are actually lowering the cortisol. A lot of times that's zone 2 aerobic work, that's bodybuilding. A lot of my personal training or one-on-one clients don't even really do traditional CrossFit because of their high stress levels. Now we do dabble in some regular CrossFit in there, but for the most part, we're doing zone 2 aerobic work and bodybuilding style movements because that's really all their nervous system can take. And if you look at on a long enough time horizon, those are the most important things anyways, because we're maintaining body composition, we're maintaining the cardiovascular system, and we're maintaining muscle mass, and we're also mitigating joint stress. And also it's a lot easier on the central nervous system when we don't do as many compound or high intensity movements. And so the key point here is that we want to adjust volume intensity, but not consistency. That's really important. That in terms of your cadence, when it comes to your frequency of your training, you need to be sticking to a schedule and you need to maintain it no matter what. Even if your workout is quote unquote bad, in my opinion, there are no real bad workouts as long as you show up and you get some movement in. You're still building that habit, okay? And I forget that all the time is that a lot of times my workouts, I'll give 50%, 60%, 70% effort. And it's not because I can't give more, I want to get more, or of course I want to give more, but it's more about building the habit and doing it regardless of how I feel and building that muscle over and over again of that discipline of I'm going to do it regardless. That keeps me going and then without those days, I won't have really good workout days as well. So and then that leads me right into my next point, which is you have to be willing to adjust the plan. So some tactical advice here is that, you just lower the weights, you focus on movement quality. So the other day, for example, I was really tired, but I wanted to get some training in. So I just went in and I worked on 3 position snatch. So I did high to low. So I just worked from the hip, from above the knee, and then from the floor. I didn't go over 135 pounds. In fact, my goal was to just do like 95 to 115. I ended up feeling really good. So I went up to 135. Didn't go any heavier than that. Just got like 7 to 10 sets in, did a few squats, and that was about it. Just got some lifting in. That's all I did. It probably took me about 45 minutes total, including warm up. And it maybe at the time for sure, it felt kind of useless And younger me would have would have skipped that training session altogether because I'm like, well, if I'm not going to lift heavy, then what's the point? But that's not the case because I dialed in my mechanics. So guess what? The next time we snatched in class, I hit a 210 snatch, which is like that's 15 pounds heavier than I hit the week before, simply because, I didn't get that much stronger in 7 days. It was just simply for the fact that my mechanics were better. So I was able to put up an extra 15 pounds I normally did, and it was a lot easier because my mechanics were dialed in. So you always have to look at things that sometimes that maybe that quote unquote bad or lower key or 50% training session is actually what I like to call a setup session. So it's a setup for my next workout, which is going to make my this quote unquote bad workout the next one will be good because I practice. And I think that's a lot of times we get that wrong is because we always think that the workouts have to be intense, they always have to be heavy, they always have to be leaving me on my back, I have to be sweating super hard. But at the end of the day, you're going to make progress even if you're just working on other things and just quote unquote, well, I say quote unquote a lot in this one. I need to stop saying that. Sorry. I'm annoying myself. But you need to uh, you just need to be able to use it as practice, as a setup session and getting ready for the next session. And sometimes shorter sessions are even better because you're like, I'm just going to go in there, move around for 30 to 45 minutes and call it, which is great. And then what this does is it shifts goals from progress to maintenance. And sometimes maintenance and maintaining is a lot better than going backwards. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? So a phrase that I would like to use with my clients is that we're not quitting, we're just pivoting. Because a lot of times we always have to change up training cycles. Sometimes I'll scrap an entire training cycle because they're just not ready for it in terms of their nervous system. Now, physically, they may be ready, but they're just really tired or they're just going through a phase. Maybe they lost a family member or something. They're dealing with other external stress. So we just pivot to something else, and that's okay. You have to be okay with that and realize that sometimes training plans need to get changed. And then now we're going to talk about normalize the fluctuations. So life is going to have ups and downs, right? So training has to be flexible to survive. And this is exactly why people fall off the bandwagon with fitness as well, because as soon as something slaps them in the face, they're like, well, I'm just not going to work out at all. When really you just need to give yourself a break and, just be flexible with it and realize that there's other things that you can work on that are still fitness related. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to make progress. And so, for example, like I had someone recently who I was working with, they were going through a divorce at the time and they were under a high level of stress. And so what we did is that we just modified their training, right? They were ready to just kind of like take a break. And I'm like, hey, you know what? You need this right now because doing nothing is just going to make the matters worse because you're going to feel worse. Not only that, you're going to backtrack. And then when you do come back, we're going to be starting in a deficit of where we were in terms of fitness. And so what we want to do is at least just pivot and let's work on building your aerobic base. So that's what we focused on. We're doing a lot of lifting at the time. And so we focused on building more of an aerobic base so they can handle more volume because that was an issue. And the great thing is that when we got through that whole phase together and everything was finalized, that they came back even stronger to do their lifts because they recovered better in between not only their sessions, but between their reps, between their sets. And so they were able to take on more volume for their lifting, which was fantastic. And that was ultimately our goal. And so it was really good to pivot that way and to change up the training. And, it really helped reframe success because showing up during the chaos is a lot harder than, PRs in peacetime, as we like to say. And long-term consistency over short-term perfection is what we're actually going here. And what matters is the habit, not the output. So we're always going for how can we make this to where we can do this for the rest of our lives, lifelong training, and we're always constantly adapting. We're not pausing. And training is a mainstay. It's not a luxury. Training is something that we're always going to have to do. So, and also the more you do it when times are bad and when times are tough, think of all the progress you're going to make when times are good. And think of if you're going to have those down times or and if you stop completely, when you are in those good times, you're not going to be set up for success and it's going to take even longer. So you might as well at least try and maintain as much as you can, or at least make small progress in other areas during those times of high stress. And so the recap here is that less stress equals more gains, more stress equals smarter training. And, it's just a reminder that, and a reminder for myself as well, is that you just need to adjust the plan, not the standard. And so if you do me a favor and share this with a friend who needs permission to train differently this week, and let me know if you need any help with this, I'd be more than happy to help you guys. If you're under a lot of stress, I'll talk to you anytime. on how we can make things easier for you in your training. Thank you so much for listening. If this was helpful, do us a favor and leave us an honest review. We'd really appreciate it. Until next time, good luck, have fun, nailed it.